welcome to Liturgical Shenanigans, a Wayfolk Arts podcast, with your hosts, Hannah,
Phil,
Jackson,
and Maddie.
Hi there, everyone. Jackson here, and welcome to this first episode of a new season. We're excited for this coming season. We've got a lot of things planned as we move into this new year and new set of projects. We'll be dwelling in the Psalms of Ascent all throughout the course of the year, and we're excited to share our translations and our writings, our prayers, our blessings, our poems, our songs with all of you. As part of that process of engaging the Psalms of Ascent, we're adding another beat into our podcast rhythm. The main show, the Liturgical Shenanigans show you know and love, will continue to be all of us chatting about a piece that we have written, whether that's a collect or a prayer or a poem. We'll continue in that process. But these episodes, these translation episodes, will focus on just the translation, and it'll just be the one who did the translation for that particular scripture that month. So, this episode, you're with me. I translated Psalm 120, which is the first of the Psalms of Ascent, and I'm excited to get to share just a little bit about what that process was like for me. But first, let's hear the psalm. In my fear and anxiety, I cried out to the Lord, and the Lord heard me. Lord, deliver me from lips that lie, from tongues filled with deceit. What will be given to you, and what will continue to be done to tongues of deceit? The arrows of the warrior, sharpened in the coals of the juniper tree. Woe to me, for I live now in Mesech. I dwell in the tents of Kedar. My soul has dwelt long enough with those hating peace. I am peace, and speak for peace. They are for war. The process of translating this particular psalm was really fascinating. There are so many little tidbits in this psalm that beg the question of what do they mean? There's this beautiful analogy that of the warriors, the arrows of the warrior and the sharpened coals of the juniper tree. But what does that phrase mean? What does that really mean to us? And it was only in the translating and some subsequent research that I was able to explore that a little bit more and discover that juniper trees hold more heat in the forge than other types of wood, and so an arrow sharpened with the embers or the coals of the juniper tree would be a exceptionally sharp and well-tempered arrow. So it's little pieces like that stood out to me. The other one that really made me zoom in on and kind of ask the question of how this makes sense for a more contemporary ear is the woe to me, for I live now in Mesech, and I dwell in the tents of Kedar. Mesech and Kedar, in my initial reading, sort of seemed like, maybe a land or, a land and a ruler, the land of Mesech and the ruler Kedar. But that's not the case at all. Mesech and Kedar are two regionally distant places, far to the north and far to the southeast of Jerusalem. So distant that it would be very unlikely that you would ever connect the two of them in one trade route, for instance, or on one journey necessarily. So that carries the sense of being flung wide to the edges of the earth. Woe to me, for I am flung wide away to the edges of the earth amongst those who live for war when I am for peace. One of the most exciting elements of this particular psalm is the last couple lines of the psalm. The Hebrew is very, very interesting. It is ani shalom. It starts with ani shalom. Now, most of the time, this psalm is translated as something along the lines of "I am for peace," and but when they speak, they are for war, or something along those lines. But that ani shalom, that like very clear "I am peace," so stood out to me that I had to capture it in some way. I wound up putting a repetition in just to be sure that in English we got the sense that the psalmist is writing of "I am so for peace. I am peace, and I speak for peace. They are for war." The longing, the desire of the psalmist to live in a manner of shalom, even amidst those who do not, is so felt in that ani shalom. A struggle that I had in this piece in translating it is trying to capture the evocative imagery of some of this psalm amidst trying to make some of it make sense and flow into the English out of poetry that is written in Hebrew. So there are lines in there like, "What will be given to you and what will continue to be done to tongues of deceit," that flow interestingly in English, and I tinkered with it for a while trying to find a way into it, but ultimately I try in these translations, and in the translations I do, to stick as true as I can to the original Hebrew, just bringing it into the English. And so I struggled with making it flow sometimes, but that's what the other parts of our writing is for. And in a week or very soon, depending on when you're listening to this, you will also have available to you the collect prayer that I wrote for this piece. And in that one, I do a little bit more work with the flow, but this particular psalm and trying to capture some of its evocative images as it flows into the English has been a bit of a struggle and a challenge as I engaged this piece. I love that right off the beginning of this psalm, we get God at work in this psalm. "In my fear and anxiety, I cried out to the Lord, and the Lord heard me." I love that the psalmist is writing from this wilderness position, flung wide to the corners of the world, longing for peace, longing to be amongst people who practice shalom. And in the middle of all that fear, of all that anxiety, of all that looking over your shoulder along the wilderness pathways, right away, God is there. And I think in general, this is good news for us, but I feel specifically in my life at the moment, the good news that amidst fear and amidst anxiety and amidst wondering when the cycles of lies and deceit will eventually run their course, the knowledge that we are heard, that we are not alone, that we are walked along our wilderness ways by the one who made the way in the wilderness, is such good news. And I'm grateful for the psalmist in this particular psalm giving that to us. That's all I have for you for today. Getting to work and translate and dream in this space with the psalmist has been such a privilege, and I'm excited to get to continue the conversation with the rest of the Liturgical Shenanigans crew. Keep an eye out on our Instagram, keep an eye out on the podcast page, keep an eye out in all our spaces on our Patreon at patreon.com/wayfolkarts. And we'll be talking more about Psalm 120 as we continue to meditate on it this month with all of you. Thanks for listening. See you on the main show.